Hello, and welcome to NTFP News, Channel 0. I'm your host, Safe Hudson, and I am filling in for our primary anchor, who is out with COVID. As with all minor illnesses, we are wishing them the best in their recovery and look forward to seeing them back on the air within a couple days. First, in local news, women are preparing for the annual Miss Plus pageants by soliciting local businesses for donations to fund their endeavors on the local level, as the first step of the staircase to hopefully escalate their walk toward the Miss Plus America beauty pageant. The Miss Plus America pageant states its goal as, "We believe that all women, no matter their size, are beautiful inside and out. They deserve to represent the causes that are closest to their hearts under a title that is worthy the size of the representation." Our pageant system celebrates the essence of full-figured women and promotes models with roles in the community. A local venue organizer has stated that they are looking forward to the hometown contestants, and as a reassurance, they have fully reinforced the presentation stage so that they don't have a rehash of the 2008 collapse debacle. As with all events of this nature, however, there have been detractors, such as a local doctor who stated HIPAA requires that they stay anonymous, stated, "As the personal physician of a select few of the contestants, I believe these types of events embolden an unhealthy lifestyle against the recommendation of practitioners and of common sense itself. While we should be uplifting people's sense of self and purpose, an organization and event that supposedly fosters self-improvement, but in reality fosters self-detrimenting lifestyles, goes against my personal pledge to do no harm." When asked for their take on this repudiation at a local Chinese buffet, contestants were fairly unanimous in the response, simply pausing to say, "Haters be hatin'." In federal news, the IRS has released its 2024 tax documentation to be used in the processing of taxes related to the 2023 taxable income of the general public. Readers of the new Publication 17 titled Your Federal Income Tax for Individuals on the IRS.gov website will notice a few minor changes from the previous year's requirements stated in the 2023 Publication 54, then titled Tax Guide for U.S. Citizens and Resident Aliens Abroad for processing the year 2022 income taxes, with the increase in physical pages from 35 to 142 and the raising of the filing single standard deduction from $12,950 to $13,850. Other allotted changes include the requirements to report income from embezzlement, illegal activities such as selling illicit narcotics or child trafficking, bribes taken, and the fair market value of stolen goods, such as from theft, if you did not return said stolen goods within the 2023 tax year. Furthermore, Publication 17 puts forth that individuals are now required to declare these criminalities on Form 1040 Schedule 1 or on Schedule C if from your criminal self-employment activities. That's all this morning. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you back here at noon. I'm Safe Hudson, and this is NTFP News, Channel 0. Hey everyone, welcome to Casual Reality. First off, you need to know up front that at base, those discussables in my intro are actually things happening, and I'm simply satirizing reality. If you like what you hear in this episode, you can listen to past episodes on Spotify, Rumble, if they let me, YouTube, and I'll soon be available on X, formerly known as Twitter. Today I want to wander around some thoughts I've been muddling, starting with things to do for our healthcare systems, the border and immigration situation, which I prefer not calling a crisis, as I don't believe something that can be easily remedied is actually a crisis, and look at upcoming legislature that appears to attempt to hamstring the Second Amendment without necessarily doing away with or rewriting it completely. So part 1, we should talk about the HIPAA in the room. So maybe you're not big on the situation with the medical care in the country. Maybe you haven't had near the trouble I have with getting my own medical information due to the limitations or requirements, regulations, whatever, of HIPAA. And for those who don't know, we're going to go into a little bit of history, how it's led up to the ACA, or as most people know it, Obamacare, and some various things that it's caused havoc with. So first off, HIPAA is an acronym for Healthcare Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, HIPAA. There's been various issues with it over the years. It makes it difficult for people to get their own information, as I said about myself. And I've talked to a lot of people who've had that kind of issues. They can't get a simple rundown on, hey, am I dying? No, you got to go through a bunch of paperwork. You got to run around in a circle. You got to do cartwheels. And then maybe, with the right identification, with the right crossover, maybe they'll let you get your information. Now that has changed and alleviated in some manners over the years. Some people kind of have found workarounds within the system to make it a little bit easier for their customers or patients, depending on whatever you want to call them. Same thing. But it has been used also for the cover-up of such things as criminality. I believe it was someone in California was infecting people with HIV, I believe, and the records were difficult to get because of privacy laws, much of it surrounding HIPAA. So the history of HIPAA, again, a preemptive to ACA, as it was signed into law by Bill Clinton, August 96. President Clinton acted immediate in the wake of his historic election in 92 to put into action his health care reform initiative. Clinton simultaneously created the Task Force of National Health Care Reform and the White House Health Care Interdepartmental Working Group on January 25, 93. The cabinet-level task force that was given primary responsibility for providing advice and making recommendations to the president regarding the National Health Care Reform Package. President Clinton designated the First Lady, Hillary Rodham Clinton, as his chair. The task force aimed to create a plan for comprehensive reforms of the American healthcare system. Now, I know what you're thinking right out the gate. The Clintons were involved. Obviously, it's a criminal enterprise. And to get this signed into law, how many people had to die? Those are all very good questions. I have no idea. And according to HIPAA limitations, we're probably not allowed to know. But you might also be asking, why was Hillary the chair of a task force to reform all of American healthcare? Did somebody elect her to be First Lady? Is she supposed to be working on law for the people? I don't remember voting for her. That's because we didn't. At least not for multiple decades later, and then she lost. The rundown is, HIPAA was to be a law, and she's a lawyer, and friendly to the ideas that were being put forth, so everything worked out, and apparently nobody raised the question as to why the crap she was acting as a guide to establish a law that would cover all the lands. But aside from making it difficult to get your own information or possibly information on criminals, what they're up to, if a case calls for medical background history to be utilized, what has it done for us? Has it raised the cost of healthcare? Has it lowered the cost of healthcare? It hasn't really, any more than expected, because since 60s, 70s, basically healthcare every decade, by the end of the decade, has doubled in cost. And so HIPAA came along, at the end of the decade it doubled. A decade later, it was double that. So it's very difficult to correlate that HIPAA necessarily raised the cost of healthcare, aside from just making it more difficult, and as we'll see later, makes it a little more simple for people to get your personal information, never mind your medical information, due to electronic security database regulations that it put forth later on, after full implementation. As we said previously, HIPAA started in 96 when the Healthcare Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, HIPAA, was signed into law. HIPAA was created to improve the portability and accountability of health insurance coverage, and the act introduced a number of measures to ensure the continuity of coverage between jobs, guarantee coverage for employees with pre-existing conditions, and prevent job lock, a scenario in which plan members stayed in a job to avoid losing health benefits. Well, that's interesting, because I would ask, even now, do you avoid changing jobs to avoid changing or losing your quote-unquote better health coverage? Can you take your exact current coverage to another job like you do your cell phone numbers nowadays? You just, I moved to a different state, and you just got the same number? That is a portability act that actually worked, by the way. The cell phone, or the phone number portability act. You get a new phone under a new company, you can get a better price, everything's more competitive, because instead of saying, well, you want to keep that phone? Well, you pay the bill. How about that? How about you pay the bill? Then you can keep your phone number you've had for 10 years. Yeah, how about that? Instead, you can now say, Verizon, you're charging too much. I'm going to go over to T-Mobile, and then I'm going to move over to AT&T, and then I'm going to move over to fill in the blank. And that makes them more competitive, because you got your number no matter what. You can have it for 20 years like I have, and just move to different people if they offer you a better deal. And if they decide to start messing around with things, have a nice day. But that's not really, as we know, how the insurance works. Of course, the ACA, being a government centralized thing, kind of works that way. There's various nuances. Not that I personally can do anything with it, because last I looked, it would cost me, I believe, $700 a month, $800 a month, just for me, which is mind-boggling. And I've talked to many people that straight laugh at it, because the exact same thing in their situation. So can you take your current coverage under whatever insurance company through your job, can you just up and move that to another company? No, that's not how it works. I've never heard of it actually working that way. You can have the same coverage when you leave a lot of these jobs, but many times you actually have to pay the difference of what your company's paying, and or some penalty, or go with some insurer that offers the same plan but happens to be 10 times the price. And there have been a lot of problems with that. So HIPAA, in the end game, didn't even meet its initial criteria. The main thing it tends to do is it locks down information. So you have to be written down as an eligible person to get information on your family members, etc. You can't just have someone show up, say, okay, it's me, here's some verifiers, I need this person who's standing right in front of you, check their ID, that's that person, let them get, my vaccine records, for example. I need them at home and they happen to be in the area. Nope, can't do that. You got to fill out a paperwork, you got to sign it, you got to verify all this garbage, and then maybe possibly, if everything works out in your favor and somebody's not having a bad day, they can get a printout of what you need. So the big cock up for me is the privacy rules surrounding HIPAA that came into full effect in 2004. Had a bunch of different limitations. Like I said previously, you got to have signed papers and all this different garbage. And then moving into requirements that everything be in some sort of electronic database, supposedly under the guise of security. But what is safer for your info than being an electronic database on a computer, especially a computer connected to the internet? Well, that's, of course, is paper. But they don't like paper. They want to move completely away from paper. And maybe it's for the global warming or climate change, whatever nonsense. Maybe it's just for ease of use. And yes, you should be able to easily transfer your information to different specialists or advisors or whatever, different doctors. I want to change doctors. It should be fairly easy to do so. But how difficult is it to either have your paperwork transferred over, which they used to do all the time, or to go down and get a copy or just get your freaking folder from your doctor and bring it to the new clinician? Not that hard. Used to do it all the time. Can still be done. And of course, I'm fine with the computers that have the localized databases that aren't connected to the internet, because except for in-house people having access to those and potentially corruptly copying all this data and selling it on the internet, you're not going to have hackers getting into your stuff. So there's a limitation there. I'll talk more about that later. So the only real good thing, if you're moving to electronic only, that was added within HIPAA as an extra rule that came effective in 2009 is the breach notification rule. So if an establishment is hacked or someone goes in with a USB drive and copies a bunch of data down and starts selling it on the dark web, then they are required to put out a notification that, hey, anybody with the name that starts with B through M, your data may have been taken and is now being disseminated throughout the internet. So that's actually good. It's good to know that your stuff is wandering around, that someone might be trying to take your identity, that credit card information, social security numbers and stuff are out there. There's a lot more to that, of course, you have to deal with, but at least you know. So there's an article on advisory.com called What Hackers Actually Do with Your Stolen Medical Records. Each year, hackers steal thousands of medical records from hospitals and health organizations, and many of those records eventually end up being sold on the darknet for thousands of dollars. Here's what buyers are doing with these stolen records and how it impacts the victims. Increasingly, hackers are selling the information for profit on the black market. According to Reuters, buyers might use the information to create fake IDs to purchase medical equipment or drugs or to file a false insurance claim. It took cybersecurity expert Gary Milewski only seconds to find stolen health records online. According to CBS News, one individual was selling children's health records stolen from a pediatrician between 2000 and 2014 under the name USA Kids Fools, and the records can carry hefty price tags. According to Experian, a patient's full medical records can sell for up to $1,000. By comparison, social security numbers and credit card, those things that people are mostly scared about, that information usually sells for $1 and up to $110 respectively. What can be done about these breaches? While hacks of providers only account for around 21% of total breached records in the healthcare industry, these breaches and related incidents can have devastating consequences for healthcare organizations. Not only is the immediate cleanup expensive to address and difficult, but class action lawsuits are now commonplace following a breach. Which in reality, since HIPAA has required all these databases to be on computers, they're required to be electronic basically exclusively, and most everything is connected to the internet. In fact, we'll talk about the EPIC system later that wants to interconnect the entire world, which has its benefits. You go to France, you have a health problem, they can pull up your record, supposedly, and it's already there on the network. If you're going to set this up on the internet, there's no security. And this pretend illusion that if it's connected to the internet, it can be secure is really mind-boggling. It's a straight lie. I do not understand it, and I will not back down on that. If you're internet connected, if you're connected to a network, anything on that network, i.e. the internet, is susceptible to an attack. Continuing on, and certain incidents, like ransomware, can halt clinical activity for hours and even days, which can continue to reverberate long after the attack. As a result, every healthcare organization needs to have a strong strategy in place to mitigate cyber risk. So ransomware, real quick, if you don't know, is basically it puts things in a lockdown. Like someone takes a child and tries to get ransom for them. In this case, they take over a network or maybe a single computer system or something, and they ask for money to be transferred, usually digitally, not like in a briefcase under a bridge, and then they will unlock the organization's device. This happens actually a lot more than people like to think, and sometimes they will work deals with the ransomer, get it unlocked, back up all their data if they didn't have it backed up, etc. If you recall, not that long ago, they actually did a ransomware on multiple, I believe, water facilities. Like they ransomware the computers that control the water flow and filtration and stuff. I believe some power stations. And so some of the organizations actually paid, and I believe some of them did workarounds. I can't remember exactly, but it was a major thing for a while. Multiple things were hit with ransomwares at the same time, and that's not good. The article continues, you can't eliminate cyber risk completely. Rather, the most progressive organizations have a well-funded and widely supported security program that matches their specific organizational culture and operational needs, and ultimately is aimed at mitigating risk down to an acceptable level. So that will make you take a step back, because one thinks, okay, this is super important, HIPAA's really locking down on stuff, you gotta keep secure, and then this right here makes it seem like some sort of airport TSA deal. Because what does an acceptable level mean? So you're going to put a lot of hamperings on the people who are doing things legally. You're going to put everything on computers. You're going to make it all internet connected. And then there's an acceptable level of loss? Well, that's weird. Personally, as with all the illegal aliens awash over the southern border of the United States, my acceptable level is 0. And I would rather go to a tiny bit more effort by way of having to go to a doctor's office, having to deal with physical papers, and make that acceptable level next to 0, with mass penalty for any actual clinicians who decide to do corrupt things like sell their patients' medical records on the internet or something, then have everything connected to the internet and then say, well, if we lose a few thousand medical records every year, or it just wanders off into the internet for the dark web, as long as we're under 1 million, that should be fine. So again, really the only digital format that you can have is an offline, not internet connected, internal network, EMR system, electronic medical record system or database, and or hard copy papers that physically have to walk off or be copied or something a little more conspicuous, because this system works the same as general consumer devices. The rule is if it's connected to the internet, no matter what anyone tells you, it is not secure. The best security you have, if someone really wants to get in, they will get in. That's been proven time and time again if you even slightly pay attention to technology and news about hacking and stuff like that. Now, the thing I will throw out there on a side note, so don't freak out. Your basic items are basically secure because they have general security type stuff up. And one of the reasons is because most internet connected stuff, nobody cares about hacking. So nobody cares about hacking your PlayStation 5 because your personal information is actually stored on remote servers through Sony if you do any online purchases of digital products, etc. And that, of course, is also a problem because Sony has been hacked, I believe, multiple times and have released announcements that your data, credit card, debit card, etc., may be vulnerable. But that's beside the point. Your PS5 connected to the internet, nobody's hacking your PS5 to delete save games. Nobody cares. Nobody's hacking your smart TV to, I don't even know. I guess some of the smart TVs you can pay for stuff through the smart TV, certain apps, stuff like that. I don't have any apps like that. It's all third party. Like you sign up for Netflix and control it over the web, but then you just sign in on the TV. That's all you do there. So if they hack your TV, they're not going to be doing anything. Now, unlike the old paranoia, I'm assuming based on 1984, where there's little cameras in all the TVs. That's why they're smart, because they can see you sitting there in your underwear eating Cheetos. That's actually untrue. I specifically know I've been in many, many TVs, and the majority of them do not have little cameras. That is an extra cost for manufacturers. So the very few that do have those, they say on the box. They have it in your manual. There is some sort of camera, kind of like the Xbox One Kinect that everybody's paranoid about. That was actually a camera looking at you. And the smart TVs with the cameras work the same way. They have some sort of hand motion controls. You can turn it on by clapping, or you can fast forward by waving your hand in a certain direction or something like that. That's what those cameras are generally for, and it will tell you, because that's an extra feature. The TV is gonna be very, very expensive, and it's gonna be a notable thing. It's not gonna quietly tell you that. Now, could that be mandated in the future? Some sort of regulation, all TVs sold in the United States have to have a hidden smart camera so the government can watch you. Well, 1984 seems to thus far be proven kind of correct in a lot of manners, so it's not off the table. For some people, at least. But right now, the majority of smart TVs, not an issue. Stop being paranoid. It's fine. But your Blu-ray players, your internet-connected, I don't know, Bluetooth speakers, whatever you happen to think of, most of that stuff is not going to be hacked. Nobody cares. Unless there's some sort of viable information they can get to resell, like these medical facilities and all your medical records that apparently sell for $1,000 a medical record, they're probably not going to be bothering with you. Now, can you get a virus or malware that messes your stuff up? Sure. Is it actually technically a hack? Probably not. You probably clicked on the wrong thing. You probably downloaded the wrong file. And yeah, unfortunate. You got to reset things, delete things. But if used responsibly and you learn for the future, you can generally get around the internet being fairly safe. My personal intrigue, and now we're getting into conspiracy theory, is why would the Clintons push so hard for this type of law and for the lockdown of information? I mean, you or the Clintons, really anybody. Are you not telling people when you have a major illness? Oh, I got cancer. I didn't tell anyone. I just died. No, probably not. You're probably wrapping things up. Everybody probably knows. Maybe not deep, intimate details. Here's a bunch of pictures. Look at all these pictures. But you're probably letting your family know. You're probably telling people that are important to you. You're probably taking care of bills, setting up everything. Someone actually commented to me recently, sensibly I think, that of all the illnesses, cancer kind of is one of the kindest diseases. Even the more brutal ones that you only have a couple weeks to live or something, that's still a disease or an ailment, something that is going to kill you. That unlike, say, a car accident or getting hit by a train, something like that, you actually know what's going to happen. It's not you're just gone, and hopefully everything was taken care of. You have some time. You can get on some stuff, and that's kind of a weird way to think about it, but it's not necessarily wrong. So you're telling people about all this stuff. What is it you need to keep hidden? Like, why? Well, the only reason I could think of is that it's something deviant. If you're a business guy traveling to, say, Thailand, widely known for prostitution, and you come home, go to the doctor, get tested, and you don't want anybody to find out, you can say, no, I'm the only one who knows any information. Anybody calls, anybody asks, etc., it's full lockdown. HIPAA will cover you. You go and have an abortion under the same manner. You don't want anybody to know that you killed your child? Yeah, full lockdown. Your parents won't find out, your spouse, friends, family, boyfriend, etc., all on lockdown. That's what HIPAA will do. Because anything that is not something like bad, people really just don't keep to themselves. You think about it. Who do you not tell when you're ill? This is like you have the flu and you're out of work. You refuse to tell the work why you're out. You just say, I'm sick. Oh, okay. What are you sick with? How long are you going to be gone? I need to know these things. Is it like terminal? Is it going to be a couple days? Is it going to be a week? HIPAA laws, I don't have to tell you anything. I mean, come on. No, you're telling them. I got the flu. It's going to be like 5 days. I'm basically out of work this week. Or I got COVID, and then each company nowadays is going to have their own rundown. Okay, you have to be gone 2 weeks, and when you come back, you have to be in a mask for 9 weeks or some nonsense. My theory here is based on the fact that we know about old Bill and his trysts, his interns, his friendship, hanging out with Jeffrey Epstein on his little pedo island. Of course, there's also rumors floating around that Bill, at various points in the past, has stated that he's completely sterile, which is interesting because he has a daughter. So that kind of coincides with the rumors that Hillary might have been running around on Bill. And so there's these controversies, potential scandals and stuff. And golly gee, the people that were really pushing for HIPAA and a lockdown of information also have a lot of stuff to hide. And I find that very interesting. But I know I've been talking a lot of smack on HIPAA, and there's a lot of people out there that I'm sure, well, I am very upset that you would say privacy is a bad thing. Privacy isn't a bad thing. But it's very simple to call up, give somebody the last four of your social, your birth date, this is my name, your address. I mean, they do this for accounts of all sorts that have extended personal information on it. Those are your verifiers. There we go. What can I do for you? Instead of all the paperwork and all the BS and roundabout, all the legal lockdowns and stuff like that. So for those people that are upset about this, that haven't ran into these limitations and are actually bothered by it themselves, I will show you how little I care about medical security, as I've told many people over the years. And I'm going to tell you a couple medical things I've had. First off is cat scratch fever, or philanosis. It's a bacteria infection caused by getting scratched by a cat. It causes various problems. One of the things it did with me, almost exclusively actually, was it caused every lymph node in my entire body to turn rock solid, to the point that the doctor thought I might have an extremely high-speed advanced lymphoma. So they actually tested me for cancer. 2 weeks waiting for results for a cancer test, and then I couldn't just get them over the phone. They said, we have the results. I said, am I dying? They said, you're gonna have to come down here. That was my senior year of high school. Turns out it was just a bacterial infection, got some antibiotics, and away I went. I had COVID, twice that I know of, quite possibly more, and surely there's more to come. I did not get the COVID vaccine. Yeah, I didn't get the COVID vaccine. It'll be a cold day in hell when I get the COVID vaccine. And there you go. There's some of my medical history. I haven't had anything extreme, really. Appendicitis. I had my appendix out. That's on my medical record. All in lockdown. You know what all this does for me, though? Nothing. None of it matters. You knowing that does nothing. You can't take that information and sell it on the internet. That's not the viable stuff. So you can't blackmail me over this information. I don't care. This is not stuff I can help. Most medical things are not stuff people can help. And thus, how can you be blackmailed for it? Unless it's deviant activity. And that, again, brings us back to, what are you up to, Bill and Hillary Clinton? All right, on to the next segment here, which we'll call California, New Mexico, and Arizona will be the new Texas border. So there's some interesting arguments over the ability of Governor Abbott securing the Texas southern border. And I'm noticing many people in the news and online say that since he is ignoring the ruling, quote unquote, of the Supreme Court, that I guess we other people can do the same and return to wantonly killing children in the likes of Roe v. Wade. As a reminder, of course, the job of the Supreme Court is not to dictate or write law, but to translate the Constitution, and thus the constitutionality of laws and court judicial verdicts. So in any case, even though the Supreme Court may say something is constitutional or not, there still has to be state and federal laws created around said constitutionality to actually rule over the land. The interesting thing is no one seems to want to discuss what the Supreme Court said, and that they said Biden can remove the fencing. Governor Abbott came back at this with constitutional arguments stating the failure of the Biden administration to fulfill the duties imposed by Article 4, Section 4, has triggered Article 1, Section 10, Clause 3, which reserves to this state the right of self-defense. For these reasons, I have already declared an invasion under Article 1, Section 10, Clause 3, to invoke Texas's constitutional authority to defend and protect itself. That authority is the supreme law of the land and supersedes any federal statutes to the contrary. Quote unquote, etc., etc. So first off, let's examine what Article 4, Section 4 of the Constitution is, and how and why it has triggered Article 1, Section 10, Clause 3, which he is citing as his overarching enabler to proceed along the lines of what he's doing. So Article 4, Section 4 says, the United States shall guarantee to every state in the Union a republican form of government, and shall protect each of them against invasion and against domestic violence. So I'll remind you that the Republican form of government being presented here is not Republican Party form of government, like the conservatives and the ultra-MAGAs and the Christian nationalists. That's Republican as in Democratic Republic. So as a refresher, if you forgot from one of my previous podcasts, democracy is you voting. The Republic part of it is the people that you voted for are supposed to represent you, the voter, in their position of power when they're muddling over setting up laws, changing laws, creating rules, etc. They're not supposed to be creating rules according to their beliefs and feels and whatever is going on in their personal lives or lives of their friends or whatever. They're supposed to be doing what you, the people, as a majority, wish to see happen. So if an area says, we don't want crime, their elected leaders should be working to stop crime. If you as a state, for example, overall, and many of the states are in heavy majority toward this, want to eliminate slaughtering babies before they're born, and in some ways after they're born too, then the representatives of the state, the senators, the congresspeople, the governors, etc., should be working to make that happen, even if for some reason they have a crazed bloodlust to slaughter babies willy-nilly. That's how that's supposed to work. So on to Article 10, Section 10, Clause 3, no state shall, without the consent of Congress, lay any duty of tonnage, keep troops or ships of war in time of peace, enter into any agreement or compact with another state, or with a foreign power, or engage in war, unless actually invaded, or in such imminent danger as will not admit of delay. Now that's some weird verbiage there, but a simple rundown is each individual state will not just say, we're now at war with Mexico. We declare war on Mexico. That's not their duty. That's not within their rights. They can't build up massive amounts of armies or troops, ammunition, etc. to lay siege to, say, California. Because if any state was going to attack another state, let's face it, it would probably be California. But that's not happening. It shouldn't happen according to the Constitution. They can't do it. And if someone were found to do it, it would be shut down immediately. And I really think that all the states would be on board with that. I'd be on board with that. But of course, toward the end here, they do give the addition of unless actually invaded. So if Mexico as a country invaded Texas, that would fall under here. And they could then engage in some sort of warfare. Now, should they be calling on the federal government and the rest of the country to come to their aid as an attack on Texas is an attack on the country? Yes. But they do have the right, without calling the Congress, without getting within their buddies in D.C., to just engage in what could be most accurately called a defensive warfare. Furthermore, or in such imminent danger as will not admit of delay. A little bit complex verbiage there. It's almost like smart people wrote this. And that, of course, also means that they can engage in warfare, again, if there was an invasion, like at the southern border, And they don't have to wait for the military, the federal military, to get there. Admit of delay just means that they can't wait. They can't wait for the federal government to decide to do something, or for all these troops or gear to travel down, say, to Texas. So Texas has the right to engage and defend because we can't have any delays. It has to be done. It has to be done now. Constitutionally, they have the right to do that. So, of course, the Supreme Court didn't say Abbott couldn't put up fencing. They said Biden could take down the fencing, which, of course, is true. You can always do things you're not supposed to. So that's kind of a silly... Why would you even make a statement like that? You can do that. Yeah. I mean, I can drive my car off a bridge and, crash into the highway below. That doesn't mean I should. So that's a weird take from the Supreme Court, the people that joined on it, because not everyone did, keep in mind. It was a 5-4 statement, as it's not really a true ruling. So unfortunately, in just a preliminary search, I couldn't find that the Supreme Court said he was supposed to be fencing and blocking this obvious invasion at the border, which of course they should, as we just read in the constitutional articles that Abbott has cited. They should definitely know this. How does a governor know this and they don't? They obviously do. That's ridiculous. Why the people that joined up with the people who want to slaughter babies to say that he can take down fencing, but not to say he can take down the fencing, but he's going against his oath of office? That's very weird to me. And maybe they did say that. Maybe it's being kind of suppressed in the general data streams. I don't know. I haven't seen it yet. If I come across anything, that'll be news to me, because the Constitution says he shall, not should, shall protect from invasion. We just read it. And that's an order if you're upholding the Constitution, as Biden, as any president, pledges to do. But the real issue here is the word invasion. And, well, the real issue here is the changing of definitions, or turning all words into putty and clay and remolding them to fit your current definition. So that it's literally being denied that there's any sort of invasion over the border. It's not an invasion. Oh, why do you keep saying that? That's cruel. They're not invading. Do you see any weapons? They've literally said this. Do you see any weapons? Are they coming across with rifles and chain guns and hand grenades? Well, I mean, the gangsters that are gotaways and the drug traffickers and stuff, yeah, some of those have been caught with that. So, whoops. But the general populace coming across, no, not really. They got a bunch of clothes. For some reason, they have some really sweet cell phones, but way more expensive than mine. Some of them got wads of cash in their pockets. Some of them rolling name brand gear that I don't have and don't even know if I can afford, never really looked into it because I don't care. But them remolding words, saying, well, it's not an invasion, so we don't have to protect the border. It's not an invasion. Why do you keep saying that? We're not going against our constitutional duty because it's not an invasion. They're not waging war on us. They're just flooding over the border and taking all our resources and, causing a bunch of havoc and criminality. But the actual definition, perchance you haven't looked it up recently, in the American Heritage Dictionary, is the act of invading, especially the entrance of an armed force into a territory to conquer. And that's kind of what they're twisting around to say, well, they're not invading because they're not an armed force. They're not wearing fatigues and stuff. Oh, but let's skip down a little bit. It's also an intrusion or encroachment, which, again, you can twist around the word intrusion and say, well, they're not intruding really. I mean, how are they intruding on you? They just want to work. They just want a home. They just want democracy. But this definition actually includes something that's very difficult to twist around because it includes the word encroachment. And encroach means to take another's possessions or rights gradually or stealthily, to advance beyond proper or former limits, or, of course, to commit encroachment. So that word right there in this definition completely destroys the argument over it's not an invasion, because part of the definition for an invasion is the act of invading. It's an intrusion, which can be twisted also, but it's also an encroachment. And how you can twist encroachment around, that rights are not gradually or stealthily being taken. As a matter of fact, I believe many people in Chicago are arguing just that point right there. Advancing beyond proper or former limits, that's called a border. So that's obviously that you can't cut that out. I mean, that's how you're going to twist it. So that's where he's hitting a wall. And if people actually did a little bit, tiny bit of research, even definitionally, never mind anything else, they would quickly and easily see, oh yeah, this is definitely an invasion, it's definitely an intrusion, and it's most definitely 100% an encroachment. So you, as many people, might be asking, why have no border bills been passed to stop this massive flow? Well, first off, we have the Constitution. Overrides pretty much everything, and that already has, in the Constitution, as we have gone over, that limitation. So there's that. And then there's other laws that have been utilized in the past. So they're already there. There actually is something in the works, something of a compromise type thing. I'm not 100%. Everyone keeps saying different numbers. I don't really care to look it up because, again, the laws are already there. It doesn't really matter. The current rumor I hear going around is Biden and the Democrats have some sort of bill that want to limit the amount of people that can cross the border to 5,000 a day, which I'll roughly calc it for you. And that's pretty much around 2 million a year if you include what they call gotaways, which are human traffickers, drug dealers, gang members, etc., who, while all the border people are working with the crowds just wandering over the border, claiming asylum and stuff, they're in another area crossing the border and making their way to the interior, and they don't even know they're there. They don't know how many there are, they don't know what they're doing. They're off to the side. And the occasion that they do find them, there have actually been incidents of things like the gotaways will throw children out of a moving vehicle in hopes that the border patrol will stop and help the child so that they can get away into the interior unabated. But anyway, this bill that they've put forward also has a bunch of funding for Ukraine and I think some other pork in there. And the compromise, the argument from the Republicans, apparently is something limiting it to 3,000 people a day, which in a year's time, instead of 2 million a year, is a little over 1 million a year. But I believe it doesn't have Ukraine funding and a couple other things. So you could say, well, that's better. You know what's even better than that? Constitutionality and the laws that are already in the book that say, let's keep it at 0. How about 0? They're called illegal for a reason. Just this argument of no one's illegal. They're people too. Yeah, they are people too. I don't hate them. I don't want us to mow them all down like rabid dogs or something. They just need to be stopped from invading the country. That's what we're asking. But they are definitely illegal because they're going against laws. So we've established that words can be malleable. You can twist things around and ignore certain things if you play with the definitions, and of course ignore part of the definitions. Then it only comes down to the question of why. Well, a few reasons, some of them a little theoretical here. One reason is, of course, votes. There have actually been people come out and say, well, we'll get these people in, then we'll put a blanket citizenship. Everybody is just, if you're in the borders, you're just a citizen. All you gotta do is make it across the border, boom, instant citizen. We need to diversify. So the voting pools have a more diverse fill. And it's not just a bunch of evil, straight white people with their beliefs. Ugh. And really, the whole strategy is a little bit along the lines of Napoleon Dynamite. You remember that movie? It was quite popular for some time. Part of the segment was running for a school office. And Napoleon's friend, Pedro, was running for, I believe, president. And their tagline was, vote for Pedro, and all your wildest dreams will come true. That's kind of what they're running. And everybody crosses the border. They may actually be giving them a pamphlet. Here you go, vote Democrat, and all your wildest dreams will come true. Thanks for coming. The second one that's being stated is diversity. As I already referenced a moment ago, they want to diversify everything. Some people have even inclined to say, well, this is good because they'll come up here, they'll intermarry, and then we'll get rid of all these white people. It'll just be like, I guess, a sea of sandy brown, kind of different tones of brownage. I don't know what the exact idea is. And then I guess the cultures will also intertwine, and that will somehow weed out Christianity, even though a lot of Latin countries are heavily Catholic. Of course, there's a little more out there ideas, a little less well-known, a lot more smack talk ideas, like the one titled The Great Replacement Theory, which plays in with the DEI. It plays into what I was previously saying, bringing all these people in and, making it less white, getting all the white out. Go away, white. Now everybody's just sand-colored, some sort of tinty of brown. And there's a lot of pushback against that, even though, as we've currently discussed, they seem to be kind of doing that. It's really hard to ignore that. You're doing one thing, but you're saying this great replacement theory is completely fake. And then we've got people at the WEF and stuff, if you want to listen to hours of them rambling on about other crap, saying that, oh yeah, totally, we need to override the Western civilization and this heteronormative and the white patriarchy, whatever entitlements they happen to be using in their personal little speeches. We need to replace all these people and just have like a universal social system, a universal personhood. And if we can just get everyone to believe the same thing and be the same color, replacing all these other ideas and all these other peoples and colors, then the world will be one and everything will be perfect. Sure. Let's see how that works out and how it has always worked out historically. But furthermore, something that is definitely pushed back against and people don't like to talk about, and that is, of course, discord and chaos. If we think back to, say, the French Revolution, there were people that raised up discord and chaos by getting everybody in a hubbub. Then they went and killed all the people they didn't like. They wanted to take down. They wanted the power, so they got into a position of power. But then, because people were all in a frenzy, they kind of went and then killed the people that moved up into positions of power when that void came along, and then they got beheaded. Maybe that's why some of these ultra-wealthy executives and corporate leaders are building underground fallout shelters, whatever you want to call them, through companies like Abbott, which I included the link underneath this podcast, so you can actually go and look it up. I believe they start at somewhere around 6 million, and there's a lot of rumors, at the least, and some evidence going around that Biden, Obama, head of big companies like Google, Facebook, etc., or Meta, whatever you want to call it now, are actually working on some ginormous $50 million fallout shelters. So they, of course, to some effect, have probably learned from the past, if they're going to cause discord and chaos, then they're going to need a place to stay, because they're usually going to be, historically, some of the first to lose the heads. So this goes along with one of my older theories. You can call it a conspiracy or not, I don't really care. I've discussed it with other people, and it has a lot of base to it. So, working with past arrangements from Obama, other people, but Obama was a big one that kind of said it out loud, to potentially implement martial law for the 2024 election year if needed, under the guise of like a national emergency by declaration. That theory partially is based on a question from a reporter during the Ferguson riots, I believe it was. I cannot find the clip from that. I've really tried. I cannot find it. But in it, Obama was answering questions, and to one of the questions, he stated that if things escalate, martial law is not necessarily off the table. Now, I recall directly, I was in a doctor's office waiting room, stretching my legs, stretching my back, and I actually stopped. And I was, wait, what? Now, of course, unfortunately, I didn't have a DVR. I couldn't rewind it, record it or anything, but it definitely took me back, and I had to process it for a second. Did he just say that he's not going to reject a potential of martial law for these little riots that could be shut down so quickly? You roll in and arrest everyone. Riot's over. That's it. Why would martial law be needed? And that's something I've thought about for a solid decade plus. It just stuck in my head. I couldn't believe that he would actually say that out loud, live on the news. But following that up, there was actually an executive order. That, of course, was fact-checked when people started claiming that, oh, President Obama is setting things up with this executive order to potentially implement martial law and call a national emergency and lock the entire country down and say, it's my way or the highway. Because I'm Obama and you can do what I say, right? All right. So I found here on the fact-checking website, Snopes.com. They're not the only ones, but we only need one. It says, quote, despite claims that the executive order provided the president with unprecedented new powers, such as declaring martial law, seizing private property, implementing the rationing of food, gasoline, and drugs, restarting peacetime conscription, and nationalizing American industry, merely by declaring a national emergency, the National Defense Resource Preparedness Executive Order issued by President Obama was simply a minor updating of a similar order issued by Bill Clinton in '94. Oh, Clinton. I'm glad you brought him into here. That's very interesting. Which itself had decades-old predecessors, and amended several times since. Another website, Inquisitor.com, had an article debunking the idea that this EO had anything to do with martial law and stuff. It states, at the very end, because it goes through a whole bunch of stuff, debunking, but then at the very end, it says, quote, while Obama has not enacted martial law at the moment, he has signed bills into law which favor that policy. MrConservative.com explains that an order known as National Resource Defense Preparedness, which was signed by Obama, allows the government to take control of any given resource during a time of national emergency. The bill also makes it such that a state of martial law can be activated at any time on the president's orders. So don't you love these articles that debunk something, and then they hide it at the very end? Like, you gotta read page after page after page, and at the very end, they say, Oh, by the way, all of this is true. We haven't debunked anything, and we're telling you that it's 100% on point. So I'm going to go through a few things within the NDRP EO, or National Resource Defense Preparedness Executive Order that Obama signed March 2012, which is just a couple months after the beginning of his second term. He puts through something that essentially allows for a complete martial law around the entire country at any given dictation of national emergency, which, keep in mind, the important thing here is that national emergency is being utilized to describe things like climate change, which everyone with 2 brain cells knows is actually a constant. The climate is constantly changing. That's why it's dry sometimes. That's why it's wet sometimes. Humidity. You have hot days, you have cold days. If you're in the South, Georgia, South Carolina, etc., it's cold one day and you can't take off enough clothes the next because it's just too friggin' hot. So the climate's always changing. But now people are calling it a national emergency, a global emergency. So under that terminology, we're twisting words again. What can be done here? Well, let's see what this executive order actually includes within it. And yes, I'm not going to just smack Obama around because these things may have been before him and things were just updated, tacked on a little bit. And in some respects, this actually can be a good thing. I mean, if there was an actual national emergency that's not climate change or not white nationalism or some nonsense, then you would want to actually have some form of control over things. You would want to be able to mobilize resources to take care of the situation. And then, of course, once the situation is taken care of, you pull back all the limitations and lockdowns because it's no longer a national emergency. So as I said, we're not going to go through the whole thing, but we're going to start with a few pointed sections, starting with section 201. It says the authority of the president conferred to require acceptance and priority performance of contracts or orders to promote the national defense over performance of any other contracts or orders, and to allocate materials, services, facilities as deemed necessary or appropriate to promote the national defense is delegated to the following agency heads: the Secretaries of Agriculture, Energy, Health and Human Services, Transportation, Defense, and Commerce. So there you go. Everything. All things under the dictation of these areas. Of course, the president can't lay out a game table and control every little thing himself. No one can do that. But you'll have all these department heads take over anything related to these areas and then put out underlings to take care of different sections, different areas, etc. So that's the base rundown here. Everything will be taken over by the main agency heads. Moving way on down, because there's a lot of jargon in between, as all legal documents, Section 801 is definitions. The following definitions apply throughout this executive order. Civil transportation includes movement of persons and property by all modes of transportation, interstate, foreign commerce within the United States, its territories or possessions, the District of Columbia, related public storage and warehousing, ports, services, equipment, and facilities, such as transportation carrier shop and repair facilities. Civil transportation also shall include direction, control, and coordination of civil transportation capacity, regardless of ownership. So it's not just a government thing, it's regardless of ownership. Energy means all forms of energy, including petroleum, gas, electricity, solid fuels, solar, wind, and other types of renewables, atomic, and the production, conservation, use, control, and distribution, including pipelines of all of these forms of energy. That's pretty self-explanatory. If it powers something, it's under control. Farm equipment means equipment, machinery, and repair parts manufactured for use on farms in connection with the production and preparedness of food resources. All the food's in lockdown. Fertilizer means any product or combination of products that contain one or more of the elements for use as a plant nutrient. So you can't get fertilizer to do your own, even though they've locked down all the food. Food resources means all commodities and products or complements to such commodities or products that are capable of being ingested by either human or animals, irrespective of other uses to which such commodities and products may be put at all stage of processing. Food resources also means potable water packaged in commercially marketable containers. So more food and water lockdown. Food resource facilities means plants, machinery, vehicles, and other facilities required for production, processing, distribution, and storage of food resources, and for domestic distribution of farm equipment and fertilizer. Health resources means drugs, biological products, medical devices, materials, facilities, health supplies, services, and equipment required to diagnose, mitigate, or prevent the impairment of, improve, treat, cure, and restore the physical and mental health conditions of the population. I find it lightly interesting they include mental health, because if you're going into full lockdown, they're going to control, psychiatrists? Lightly weird to me. Offsets, definitionally, means compensation practices required as a condition of purchase in either government to government or commercial sales of defense articles and or defense services as defined by the Arms Control Export Act and the International Traffics in Arms regulations. So any defense articles, say bulletproof vests, and or defense services, personal security, police, something like that. So you can't buy your own defense articles. You can't trade defense articles. The government has control of all of it. Water resources means all usable water from all sources within the jurisdiction of the United States that can be managed, controlled, and allocated to meet energy requirements. So not just the packaged water here. They move into more expanded, any water resource, rivers, lakes, streams, that pond in your yard. Probably not down to that nuance, but I mean, it's all usable water. So keep in mind here that yes, Obama signed this EO. He set it up, revised it, whatever. But much of the Biden bureaucracy, all the bureaucrats involved here are actually Obama appointees. They've just kind of hung around. Some of them should have been drop kicked to the curb when Trump got in, and maybe they'd have been pulled back, I don't know. But they've been hanging around for years in various positions throughout the bureaucracy. And of course, we know that these bureaucrats are a little off and not great in what they're doing. For example, like John Kerry, which is the former climate czar because he's stepping down to campaign for Biden or something like that. And then there are others that are not only calling for a national emergency declaration over such things like climate change, as we've already discussed, but also the same requests from Homeland Security regarding homeland terrorists, like MAGA extremists, white supremacy, which Biden himself publicly in speeches has declared as the biggest threat to our democracy, which Biden, as Politico, quotes him when he was speaking at Howard College saying, white supremacy is the single most dangerous terrorist threat in our homeland. And I'm not just saying this because I'm at a black HBCU. I say this wherever I go. Quote from the president from Politico. So there are many apparent, or at least dictated, national security threats floating around the country at the moment, and things are in order to declare a lockdown, a national emergency, or even martial law. Surely you haven't forgotten COVID. And yes, they didn't implement this during COVID. Maybe they thought it would be too stark of a change. It would be too aggressive, and there would be too much pushback. They needed to kind of work into it a little bit. I don't know. Because there was relatively pittance that they did around that. And maybe not letting you into a grocery store without a mask on. But I do say pittance because according to this documentation, they could have done a lot more. So my last segment is going to be S3589, S6981, and the war on the Second Amendment. So S3589 is a new bill, I believe within the last month, being put forth by Senator Edward Markey of Massachusetts to the Senate Judiciary Committee. It is co-sponsored by someone on the Judiciary Committee, Senator LaFonza Butler of California. And within the Judiciary Committee, she is also on the Subcommittee of Criminal Justice and Counterterrorism. S6981 is a bill being put forth by Congressman Jamie Raskin of Maryland. You'll notice, of course, this is being put to the test in both houses. Now, the rundown is both bills are basically exactly the same. I went through the text of each bill individually, and it's almost word for word, copy and paste. There might be a couple nuances, but I'm not playing Where's Waldo here, so I'm not going to go through and look for a dot and an I and a cross on a T. Basically, exact same thing, copy and paste, but they're being put forth in two separate houses. Now, 6981 does have 11 different people co-sponsoring it, whereas at the moment, 3589 only has one co-sponsor. Maybe that's because somebody in the Judiciary Committee is going to help push the bill through. I don't know. But either way, they're copy and pasting and trying to hit different floors multiple times in hopes of one of them passing. Now, in going over and researching this, I did a bunch of internet searches on different search engines, and nothing from any news site came up. And I mean nothing. We're talking mainstream, we're talking third party. I didn't find anything in searches. It might be suppressed. Who knows? Maybe it's too new. Maybe people haven't caught on to it. But I found absolutely nothing about this specific bill. So the statement of purpose for this bill is to amend Title 18, which is the U.S. Criminal Code, to prohibit unauthorized private paramilitary activity and for other purposes. If you're not 100% registered on what private paramilitary activity would be, that would be something like a private militia. If you go out and shoot with friends, if you're in some sort of gun club that does defensive tactical training, etc., that's the kind of stuff this is going to be covering. Now, yes, they're going to say it's covering people building their own little armies to rise up and take the law into their own hands. And sure, that could fall within that description, but it also covers just local militia. And as you'll see later on, it kind of whittles into local police forces even. So as a reminder, here's what's stated in the Second Amendment. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Well, like I said, I couldn't find anything on a general internet search regarding this specific bill. Nobody seems to be reporting on it whatsoever. But something related. There is something of a debunking/argument from Salve, something to do with the Pell Center, in relation to how the Second Amendment was viewed, supposedly, in 1789. So their article states, militias would be raised by each state government. Their loyalty and devotion to the new American Republic was assured by the fact that they would be defending their families, their neighbors, and their homes. Because they might someday have to operate as a combined force, the militias were to be well regulated, meaning trained to standards set by the federal government. Now, that last sentence is good because it goes to show that well-regulated, unlike many people are arguing nowadays, does not mean regulation. Like you can regulate. You can't have this specific gun, you can't have this specific ammunition, you can't have this specific magazine, etc. Well-regulated in the Second Amendment means training. They're well-regulated, they're well-trained, they're well-supplied, not that guns are hard-regulated and the militia is hard-regulated. The only problem with this final sentence is that they tack on to the very end two standards set by the federal government, which of course is mind-bogglingly insane and stupid, because the point of this is to stand against an overpowered government suppressing the people. So there's standards set by the federal government about the regulation of militias or training and supplies. But if the federal government comes in and says, okay, you're no longer able to have the supplies, we're taking all your weapons away, you're no longer doing training sessions, no more training, no more weapons, those are the new standards set by the federal government. That completely goes against the Second Amendment. So let's get into the meat and potatoes of these bills. I am going to chop it up because, of course, there's a lot of legal jargon, there's a lot of definitions and add-ons. I know it's somehow necessary along the way. A lot of these bills will take hours to read because of it all. So we're going to get it down to the brass tacks and all the important stuff. So the first thing here is the criminal offense part of the bill, where it states, it shall be unlawful to knowingly act as part of or on behalf of a private paramilitary organization and armed with a firearm, explosive or incendiary device, or other dangerous weapon. Under that, it lists essentially some examples of what they mean. The first one being to publicly patrol, drill, or engage in techniques capable of causing bodily injury or death, which you'd really want any training militia to do that. What are they training? To beat each other with Nerf bats? And of course, the publicly patrol, we've actually seen examples of things like that. People standing their ground. For example, the BLM Antifa riots that made their way into neighborhoods, and some of the neighborhoods stood up. All the people got together, put up barriers, and went and met them at the barriers and said, no, you're not coming into our neighborhood. There's no reason for you to be in our little subdivision. All these are our residential places. There's no police stations. There's no governments or fascist regimes in here to be fighting or burning or looting or whatever. So there's no need for you to be here, and we're not letting you in. Cops were on scene. You'd have 2 or 3 cops just kind of standing there going, okay, everybody, be nice. Let's be civil here, shall we? Well, you guys are wielding blunt instruments and various other types of weapons, and people are going to protect their families and neighborhoods. That's how it's going to be. So this is saying you can't publicly patrol. You can't keep an eye on your subdivision if there comes some roving band of miscreants looking to, quote-unquote, protest with their free speech rights with a bunch of weapons that have been known to loot, kill, and destroy. The second one is interfere with, interrupt, or attempt to interfere with or interrupt government operations or government proceedings. So basically, anyone that was at the January 6th riot, which it was a protest, but it also turned into a riot, at least to some effect. This is covering all those people, because if you really get into this bill, it keeps a lot of stuff very generic, and everybody at January 6th could be looped in with the Proud Boys, or whatever other little groups are wandering around there and got busted for stuff. Because there's no way to prove that you weren't knowingly acting as part of or on behalf of a private paramilitary organization, or a militia, like the Proud Boys, who happened to be there at the same time. The third, interfere with or intimidate another person in that person's exercise of any right under the Constitution of the United States. So there we look back to my previous example of the rioters and looters that were going toward subdivisions, and the residents put up barriers and told them, you're not coming here. Well, it was said that those people were exercising their rights under the Constitution as a First Amendment, freedom of speech, and thus those people could be cited under this because they were stopping those people from their quote-unquote free speech of rioting and looting. 4, assume the functions of a law enforcement officer, peace officer, or public official, whether or not acting under color of law, and thereby assert authority or purport to assert authority over another person without the consent of that person. Well, that gives a whole lot of stuff there, because at the very end, of course, without consent of that person, how many people are consenting to the police arresting them, stopping them from rioting, burning, attacking, etc.? The most interesting thing overall, though, is whether or not acting under color of law. And that's going to mean something to the effect of if a sheriff came out and deputized 1,000 people in an arena because there was mass outbreaks of riots or some sort of mass terrorist threat or something. Who knows? Who knows? We need a ton of police, and we need them now. I've listened to a couple sheriffs in various areas who have said, you guys don't have to worry about gun rights or the government threatening you and stuff, because I have the power to go out and deputize 1,000 people today. You're going to have to bring your own gun, but I know 1,000 people with their own gun, so I can deputize all of you, and you will be acting officers, which means that would be under the color of law. And so under that color of law, you would be asserting authority over another person, but that person would not be giving consent. And lastly, to train to engage in any activity described in the previous paragraphs. So the first four there, you can't train to engage in any of those things. One would wonder how many people it takes to make a militia or paramilitary private group. Is it 2? Is it 10? Can't really find that it says along the way. But if you're going to the shooting range with 3 people, might actually fall under that last dictation there. So I'm going to try to quickly go through the penalties that this bill lists as results of the criminal activity in the previous section. So a violation that does not result in bodily injury whatsoever, you can get probation for a term of not more than 1 year. A violation that occurs after a prior conviction has become final, the person shall be fined, imprisoned for not more than 2 years, or both. A violation that results in damage to property, the person shall be fined, imprisoned for not more than 2 years, or both. And a violation that results in bodily injury, the person shall be fined, imprisoned for not more than 5 years, or both. Or death, the person shall be fined under this title and imprisoned for any terms of years, or for life. So circling back to my first example of people defending their families and homes in a rural subdivision of some sort, if the rioters had have broken down the barriers and attacked them, and they defended themselves, and any of that defense resulted in bodily injury or death to those rioters, they could be fined and imprisoned for up to 5 years, or if they're dead, just for the rest of their life, for defending their family and their homes. So a couple final bits on these bills. At the very bottom, it has a public right of action, which states whenever the Attorney General has reasonable cause to believe that any person or group of persons has engaged in or is about to engage in any act prohibited by Section 2742 of this bill, the Attorney General may bring a civil action for preventative relief, including an application for a permanent or temporary injunction, restraining order, or other order in an appropriate district court of the United States. Now, I'll remind you again, this is reasonable cause to believe that any person or group of persons has engaged or is about to engage in any act listed in this bill. So the Attorney General can just come after you if they have reasonable cause. What is the reasonable cause? Again, you go to the range with buddies, you go hunting in groups, pretty freaking general. So the private right of action after this says any person injured as a result of any violation may bring a civil action, individually or jointly, with other aggrieved persons in an appropriate district court of the United States for preventative relief, including an application for a permanent or temporary injunction, restraining order, or other order, or for damages incurred as a result of any violation, including reasonable attorney fees and costs. So there again, aside from the other penalties, the people in, man, I just love looping back to this, the little Antifa BLM riots that were trying to bust into the neighborhoods and being kept out by the residents, if any of those people are injured, or say they're injured, they can actually go and sue those people defending their homes, and potentially, if they win, you will have to pay their attorney fees and costs, and you get some sort of punishment as listed in this bill. So I find these bills extraordinarily interesting. They really get my ire and focus upon them. But what can you do about these? Well, for the bills most recently discussed here, I have contacted my state reps, and I recommend you do also. I haven't got really any feedback from anybody yet. I believe Lindsey Graham actually sent some sort of automated "thanks for your letter, we'll put you on the list" type response, but nothing viable, no actual feedback. You can call, you can email, etc. About these and some of the other things we discussed today, well, step one is to know who you're voting for. Just because you have a name recognition on a bunch of signs, somebody has a bunch of money, they put out a bunch of signs, you're like, I recognize that name. Yeah, Bill, he's a cool guy, I think. I don't know. I saw the signs, though. So if he has a lot of signs, he must be cool. You need to know who you're voting for, why you are voting for them, and forward or discuss the information about who you're voting for and why you're voting for them to people around you. I understand that everyone wants to do away with the stress of politics, just kind of ignore it. I kind of have a guise that's why we elect those people to take care of all this. I don't want to think about it. I shouldn't have to think about it. I'm trying to take care of my family, pay the bills, take care of all this inflated everything. And I understand, I know. I was one of those people for the most part. Unfortunately, it turns out many of the people that tend to seek power believe basically nothing and are not in it so they can serve a constituency, but so they can either serve themselves, friends, their family, or business associates. Or worse, they're big gelatinous spine dummies, or like gender study professors, too useless at nearly everything to be viable in any real intellectual arena. Furthermore, in a time of price hikes and both product and thought shortage, it's always affordable to pray. For the country, for our leaders, for our neighbors and family. I mean, when you get down to it, secession is not a viable option. Sorry, Texas. And really, all hope is not lost, but it is going to require a refocusing on deeper, more important things. Revamping the way we have been coerced to think, for example. Find faith in something other than yourself. Go to church. Ignore the old trope of don't talk about religion and politics at the lodge or pubs or clubs or wherever you're at. Because remember history. This country, the USA, was basically built in the local tavern. Sure, the Continental Congress met in a nice building that one of the local business people owned. Great, fine. But a lot of the stuff was worked out. A lot of the stuff was written, worked out. A lot of other meetings on the foundation of the country were in your local tavern. Now, some people might argue that involving alcohol in the foundation of a country might not be a great foundation. However, in the last few hundred years, I think that proves pretty well fine. When you have controlled people, these guys aren't getting together, blackout drunk, writing the Constitution. That's, of course, inane. It's hard to imagine because nowadays, many people don't have any self-control whatsoever, but willpower and self-control was actually highly looked upon and respected. It wasn't downplayed and laughed at as not being your true self or some other nonsense back then. The tavern is where everyone conglomerated to develop the Republican democracy that is the base of our founding. Don't forget that. And now you may sigh in relief. Here's the end. That's all I have for this episode. You've heard my take on these subjects. If there's anything you don't understand, I provided you the links to get further learning started, and I highly recommend you do. Thanks for joining the Casual Reality Show. I'm Safe Hudson. Thanks for listening, and talk to you later. So I was playing a board game with my wife the other day, a new game we hadn't tried before. I was finishing a project, so she read over the rules and went over them with me when I came to join her. Along the way, she kept reminding me of certain rules, and being tired, it took me a minute to realize she was reminding me of rules that were not previously put forth. When I called her on this oversight, she showed me that they were actual rules that she forgot to tell me. Oddly enough, the rules she failed to tell me were helpful in her endeavor to win the game. Just by happenstance, of course, she forgot to read what was on the paper. When it comes to paper, though, how is it that the bureaucracy can keep track of anything internally, but if you don't pay your taxes, they try to auction your property out from under you? They don't seem to forget that. Then when you go down to get the required hard copy of paperwork to remedy the situation, to take to 9 different offices where nobody knows anything about the job, the lady behind the security glass is confused in a manner that makes it seem like she's never even heard of paper. But she's probably had a bad day. Someone get that lady a chocolate. Perhaps sustainably sourced. By the way, do you know why it's called sustainably sourced chocolate? Because the child labor they utilize to harvest it is sustainable for at least 30 to 40 years. Sustainability is actually why I moved away from doing straight cash everywhere. I figured out that if you open a bank account, it provides you with a never-ending supply of cheap pens you don't have to care about losing or having stolen. Sometimes sustainability isn't in the cards though. Like I hear rumors that Sony and Microsoft might not do another generation of game consoles and just stick to software development for PC. Even if they don't, while Sony uses a simple but effective naming structure, what is the next Xbox going to be? After the Xbox 360, which isn't round, the Xbox One, which isn't the first Xbox, and the Xbox Series X, which sounds like something used for Magic the Gathering cards, I assume the next gen of Xbox will just be the Xbox box. Just a cardboard-colored box with ports on the back, maybe some graphics that make it look like Amazon packing tape is on it. And that's how it arrives at your house. Just a bare console, no packing, and then to save them money, they make you use your old controllers and cables to get it up and running. Who knows? But I was watching a ball game on the TV at work, and they were running back and forth, as one does in a ball game. And I asked the guy next to me what I was watching. He told me it was college. And then the coach flashed on the screen. I said, oh, I see. This is women's basketball. I was just thinking to myself, man, these are the thickest dudes I've ever seen in a televised game. Casual Reality is a production of Casual Media, LLC. Copyright 2024.